Hello and welcome to this third chapter. We're going to talk about threads. In this case, this position is equal material, and black is actually threatening, is the one that's threatening the threatens the knight. So here, if we were to move the knight around, let's say any relevant square, black will try to push the f pawn and maybe destroy a bit our king safety with f3. So here we can stop for a bit and think, what can we do? And here we have a threat, yeah? We can do a counter threat, which is the basis of the threat, the game that you try to find another answer to your opponent's idea, yeah? In this case, you find this idea, and it's like, okay, should I accept that this is happening and move, or do I have anything to counter it? In this case, we have a couple apparently similar options. If you want, you can pause and think which one does really work, which one doesn't. Both work, both doesn't. Let's start with bishop g5, because intuitively you are used to developing the bishop in one go, so it's the one that you would likely be more attracted to, because you kind of have some kind of familiarity to it, so you feel more comfortable checking the move. Okay, maybe I'm a bit over analyzing psychologically, but it's likely that you consider this move first. And now after queen f7, like any other move, okay, it's not as good, but we will see it shortly. And after we take the rook, let's say if black takes here, we have this move, then we are winning another piece. So thank you very much. And if if black does the other option, which is taking this knight, we'll be moving the bishop away. And that's it. We have an exchange up, better endgame, better position, better endgame, better position, and that's it, right? Right? No, it doesn't stop there. Now bishop c4, yeah? So what happens? Now we are getting our queen threatened, and after queen e4, black takes here, and here we can take with the rook or take with the king. If we take with the rook, this would be some kind of equal in material. So white takes with the king, and white is much better. It's not only an extra pawn, but this knight is completely dominated by our pieces, and so basically this would be an easy win. And here the difficult part about threads, capture threads, checks, everything we talked about, is that there are a lot of move orders and there are a lot of different priorities. So here black has like what, 2 captures, 3 captures, 4 captures, but okay, this is a bit irrelevant, right? Because we are a rook up. But black has this threat, which changes completely everything. Because here after queen e3, let's say, now takes here, and if we compare it with the outcome we had before, we realize that white is not having an extra pawn. We couldn't defend it. We can also play like an engine and play knight d7. Which, if you want to try to understand why this works, man, that's a very difficult puzzle. That's a puzzle I would put you if you are like 2400, because it will be super difficult to grasp that this ends up being the best move. You need to know so many layers of knowledge. Some of them are objective knowledge, so that's the difficult part. It's not knowledge that you can deduct here. It's like sometimes that's why basic endgames are very useful, because okay, you know if you are heading into that direction, it's draws or it's winning. So yeah, but this position is fine for black. Yeah. So now that we saw that, we need to be used to, when you're doing the threads, to think, okay, can I prevent my opponent's threat? Can I annoy him? Let's try different ways to threat. So it's the same thing about checks. It's the same thing about captures. Play around with it. Change the move order, but still keep it consistently and organized. So check first the checks, first the captures, first the most relevant captures, and then the threats. Yeah. So when you have this order, you will know once you reach to a point like, okay, I already covered 90%. Only this line is missing because I have it organized. This is very important, because if you base yourself in intuition, what looks good, what looks sharp, then okay, you can solve most of the basic problems, but at some point you will reach sooner your limit. That's the key part of being somehow organized in that sense. So after taking on the 8, we would be drawing after bishop c4. Okay, the game would go on. But here white has a very smart idea, which is after bishop c5, we ask the same question. We realize that knight g5 basically wins in 2 moves. Yeah. So here, after all we've been analyzing, we realize we have an alternative that basically wins easily. Yeah. Any other move doesn't create any side threat, so we would just be able to take the rook and go back. Yeah. And white is simply winning. Let's check the most relevant move, which is the same way black applied. Another interesting concept that I like to talk about is that when you have a lot of variations, you need to check a lot of moves to your ideas. Try to be economic about it. Like, try to apply the same move. Like, does this work systematically? Like in this case, like don't think too much about it. Like, just try it, and you realize very quickly that okay, it doesn't work. But you get used to trying. That's the best and most important skill you need in chess. To try moves, try captures, try threats, try checks. Yeah, I'm super annoying with this one with my students, because this kind of consistency basically allows you to absorb all the rest of the knowledge. Yeah, strategy, openings, endgames, whatever, dynamics or initiative, or this kind of different style of positions that are not so objective, because whenever you see a trick or appears to be a trick in the position, you react and you are used to trying. But it doesn't matter if you know so much of strategy, if at the point that you need to kill your opponent, you don't have the tools, which are this discipline in this case. Yeah. So yeah, basically bishop c5 wins easily. Yeah? So here in this example, we talked about comparison, we talked about the threats of your opponent, and to also always try to check a bit deeper. When you're training, I highly encourage, if you feel this is enough, just try a bit more. Try a couple moves more. And the most important part here is that you don't stop until all the forcing moves are over. Yeah. And for grandmasters or top players, forcing moves is also changes the value, and we will talk about prophylaxis in the next chapter, and you will understand why. So we go to the next example, and here we have a very simple position. Apparently, white has a bit of an advantage, especially strategically, because you think that all the pieces for black, almost all of them, cover dark squares, but we have actually an excellent control of the dark squares. Yeah. And here we are covering the key squares here, and the light squares are much in our favor. But here we have the same dichotomy, no? Bishop g4 or bishop c4 in this case, but bishop c4 is obviously much better, as it's also creating a pin. So after king f7, we need to keep creating threats, right? And here in this game, I want to talk about the difficulty about threats is that there are so many ways you can create a threat that can be categorized as a threat. In this case, we have direct threat. We are threatening material. In this case, we are having some kind of second degree direct threat. We are threatening f5 thanks to the pin. So we are adding like two pieces together. Yeah. And now after taking, now black does another thing, which is a counter threat. Yeah, in this case, black says, okay, I don't have a suitable answer to f5 because if I move the king away, the knight comes, and yeah, this is not going well for black. And now black is saying, okay, I'll do this. Then I kick the knight. Then I move the king. You know, the knowledge keeps adding. It's creating a story. It makes sense now that I told you all in this sense, but it's very difficult to create it on your head and get used to thinking that way. Like, okay, what are my options? Then I do this, then I try this, then I try this. Yeah. So, and here a very difficult part about threats is that, or checks or captures, or I would say here in general, what you want to do in chess is that you get in love or you get too attached to an idea. So if you get too attached to f5, you might not consider a different kind of move that is much better, which is knight d5. But knight d5 you need to consider it because it's simply a threat. Yeah, you just try it and see what happens. Now you realize that okay, the knight is pinned. So if you were to defend the pawn the 3 ways you have it here, or even move the pawn away, then we would have f5 winning material, because this, for instance, if rook d7, f5, the knight needs to go away, and then we have some kind of discover check, yeah? With knight b6, for instance. And so the knight is the key, but here another important and super difficult part of chess is that the fact that you were threatening something the move before doesn't mean you're threatening now. And that's the hardest thing to grasp in chess. You need to, every move, you need to update everything. You need to do checks, captures, threats the same way. You need to be like a robot. Like not to have some kind of the past knowledge kind of make your calculation much worse. Yeah. So in this case, black can simply move away, and there is no threat in here. And here we were doing threats, right? And here instinctively you'd say, okay, now I play f5, and then I threaten the pawn, and yeah, I mean the knight needs to move away. I take the pawn, then I even do a check. Yeah, like this is good enough, and you will be right. Yeah, but the funniest part is that you wouldn't be doing the correct thing, but you would be getting the correct outcome. That's something why usually coaches are good for, because sometimes you make the good move for the wrong reasons, and that's very difficult to grasp. Yeah? So that's why usually it's hard when you are trying to use engine on your own, because you say, oh, I made the good move, but not for the right reasons, and it's very hard to understand why. In this case, why? Because you did not consider the captures. You need to do it every move. So here you would see like, okay, you're winning a pawn. Yeah. It turns out that black has actually so many moves here, even just taking, because this is an opposite color bishop, but it's not that easy to win. But, and even knight d4, like counter threat in, like, okay, now white has both pieces in the air, like the knight needs to move, and the bishop will be hanging. So you can get very creative, yeah? And black can be very creative with trying checks. I mean, you would never guess knight d4 if you never tried, yeah? So that's why in this course I insist a lot on the fact of trying, and not specifically on the material, like of the kind of material. Yeah, like doesn't matter which position. If you apply this system, you'll get better. Doesn't matter how hard is the puzzle. If you play the system, you will find it. Yeah, I think it's much more important to be conscious about how you grow up as a player than not so much about doing so much material. At the beginning, it's much better that you do 1,000 problems, but it's very important that you understand why are you doing them correctly. Yeah? So. So here actually turns out that knight b6 is not that good and white is a bit better. And here on the topic of different threats, let's say what if black defends with rook? Now we have what is called a strategical threat, which is rook d1. Why? It has two layers. First layer, we have control of the only open file. Yeah. This means that we get access to we control it, and now we are threatening getting back on the 7th rank. Yeah, and here black can do many things. Yeah, in general against a threat you can prevent it, you can ignore it, or you can react to it. Yeah, and basically here black could start with bishop d6, and here, if you weren't trying, you would not find the solution here, I would say, because it's super strange. I mean, at least for me, yeah. Because now knight d5, yeah, we keep doing threats. We did 3 different kind of threats, right? Like we did like a peace threat in this case, very objective, very easy to grasp. Strategical threat, a bit more deeper. In this case, also getting the rook on the 7th rank usually limits more our opponent. In this case, especially since black committed to f6, so the king will be left in the back rank. Yeah? And now after black says, okay, no, we do another material threat, but we are not sure, okay, how is this coordinating? Yeah, and black would say, okay, let's actually solve our problems. Yeah, we defend the pawn, and we get away from the pin, and the knight is, and the king and the rooks are not getting in. Yeah, so we are in the mood of capture of threats, but with threats now we are over. Yeah, but here the most important thing is that we know that we need to check for captures all the time. Yeah, and here knight b6 is the easiest one. I'm not sure if this would be that obvious after black does this counter threat, because here the point of knight b6 is that we take, we lose, white loses the bishop. But here again black has some funny stuff, like again the checks, and here again we get some kind of endgame that white should be close to winning, I'd say, but okay, it's opposite color bishops. Yeah, so so this layer of opposite color bishops yeah, always is something to take into account. Yeah, it's objective knowledge. Yeah, but here we have another capture that might be harder to see, no, but much easier once you see it, because after we take here, and then we get access to the open file. Yeah, in this case it will be much better to start with the check, because we displace, we put the king away, and now we take, and black has opposite color bishops, yeah, but we have domination, so we have a plus here. Yeah? And if black takes with the knight, this is quite obvious that the rook and the bishop are dominating the knight. We have the control of the only open file, and we have an extra pawn. Yeah, we have so many things in our favor. Yeah? And also black has this funny move, which is knight d4, that I insist on talking about. Yeah, it's a check. And after rook d4, we are winning. Yeah, it's a very strange way to think, but the thing is that take, okay, we are a bit better. But if we take with the rook, suddenly we realize that we are also threatening the rook. Yeah, I mean, feel free to pause in any position. I'm talking a bit, I always talk too fast. Yeah, it's very hard for me. I get very excited in order to, when I'm explaining these concepts. And the thing is, you need to do it every move. You need to do it consistently. I highly encourage you that on training you should be more, let's say, diligent with that. You can write it down on your own. You can try to help yourself. First help yourself, and then take out this help, and it will come easier. Don't try to do agar puzzles in the first day. Doesn't make any sense. If you don't know who's Agar, great. Just keep doing your puzzles. At some point you will know him, if you like chess enough. So here, yeah, we have these hidden gems. Yeah, I'd say in this position. And as a small stuff for the next chapter, king f7, that looks somewhat reasonable, because after checked here, we have what is called the prophylaxis line. That after rook d8, the point here is that we have complete domination. We use the pin, so our rook controls the open file, and now we are threatening knight d5 maybe, or not, because then the rook would be in the air then. Be careful. And the point here is that we are completely winning strategically, but this is not the goal of the course, but it's for you to kind of go to the next thing if you feel ready, because there are so many things that we could talk about here. Yeah? But white is just completely winning, and with many moves. So, yeah, it's a fun position to let it out. So we go to the next puzzle, and here I'm going to talk about hidden ideas, and basically we have threats. And when we talked about different kinds of threats, we would talk about mate threats. Those are the most relevant threats. Basically here, I'm threatening mate. I see that the king doesn't have any square. We didn't talk much about it, but there is some kind of material imbalance. We have a rook up, exchange of a bishop, but black has so many pawns, and black is actually threatening us to take in the last pawn. So yeah, I mean, it's somewhat balanced in that sense. Yeah. But here, black, how can you defend the mate? The only way, without giving up a piece immediately, yeah, with the bishop can also help, but yeah, not for long, would be g5. And after f5, why? Because we cover the square that the king just left. g4. And black doesn't care about the pawns. I mean, the king is more valuable. After taking king g5, the position would go on, because, yeah, knight a5 will happen, and this is just, I mean, I would even pick black, I would say, at this point. So many pawns, yeah? So we have more ways to threaten the king, yeah? Which would be rook e5, yeah? And and black, now knight g4 is a threat. Bishop e2 is not something that we wish to ourselves. So g5 should be the only move. And now white can do the same thing. I take the pawn, and now I threaten mate. Yeah. And now white could be like, okay, and black could be like g6. Now we check, and now you go back. And then I would say, okay, I will now take the pawn, and thank you very much. Yeah. And here it comes when the more patterns you learn, the more you get rewarded. Yeah. So you need to keep the balance between, okay, it's good that any position you learn a lot of puzzles, you learn a lot of ideas, but you need to realize that some patterns are very hard to understand. Like in this case, the move is rook g5. And the point is, after you take a6, now you know, if you didn't know, this knight cannot defend this promotion. Yeah. Something I like to say is that passers are just that intuition doesn't care about passers, let's say, or the passers don't care about the intuition. Yeah, that would be the take, because here, yeah, you can move the knight where you want, but the pawn is promoting. Yeah. Once you know this, you realize that the puzzle can be solved with efficiency. What would be efficiency? Checks, captures, and threads. I do a check. I do a check. I do a capture. And now I think, and I realize that I'm winning. That's why the balance between knowing the patterns and trying, that's the key. This balance, you need to have both options. I'd say the more, at first it's important to learn your patterns, but then you need to transfer it to learning to just see what's ahead. Yeah. And here, before finishing the chapter, I want to show you a fun idea. If we keep like going through the same process. Yeah. Now that we know that this knight loses, here we have this fun idea in this variation, which is black can play bishop e2, and here we just to prevent knight g4, and here we just threaten the bishop, and the bishop goes away. And now we have the same trim, that basically this is the winning move. We threaten the knight cannot go up, and we will be doing a check and then taking the pawn and getting a passer, and now the material doesn't matter that much since we have this passer that we will be promoting. Yeah. So basically threads, yeah, they are the last thing. You see that here the checks and the captures are always more relevant, but you need to be very consistent on trying, because sometimes you will never know, and not to get biased sometimes, like saying, okay, I cannot thread this because I lose a pawn. Oh no, maybe you can. Go check further. And you realize that many moves are considered threats, because, for instance, if let's imagine there is a knight here now that you're threatening my knight. If I move back my knight, I'm actually making a threat because I'm threatening your knight. Yeah. So yeah, the concept of threat, strategical threat, counter threat, there are so many ways. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and we see you in the next chapter.